Gamers everywhere began to ask the question, if developers can simply remove titles from their personal libraries without their knowledge or consent, do they really own the games that they've purchased? Alternatively, storefronts can clearly explain that you're buying a license and that your purchase isn't a permanent transaction, meaning the license can be revoked at any time by the issuer. Just imagine a scenario where Bethesda removes 6 digital copies of Skyrim from your library just in time for the release of their Mega Ultra Booty Edition of Skyrim 2. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hard Light Network. Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about a subject that's been weighing heavily on the minds of gamers a lot lately. For those of you who might not be up to date on the controversy that's growing within the wider gaming community, back in March of 2024, developer Ubisoft found itself facing backlash from its community yet again for its delisting of The Crew, a racing MMORPG that was unique for its in-game 2-scale map of the continental United States. But as mentioned, controversy struck when on March 31st of that year, players logged in to not only find that the game was delisted from stores on all platforms, but removed from their private libraries as well. This caused concern amongst gamers not only about the longevity of their other games, but about their ownership over these digital titles as well. Gamers everywhere began to ask the question, if developers can simply remove titles from their personal libraries without their knowledge or consent, do they really own the games that they've purchased? This question would lead European gamers to form an initiative in an attempt to protect their favorite games from this sort of treatment. The initiative, entitled Stop Killing Games, would be their first attempt at creating consumer protections for their purchases. However, the concerns of gamers everywhere would not go unheard, as on September 10th, 2024, Ubisoft announced with its The Crew showcase that The Crew 2 and The Crew Motorfest would both be receiving offline modes as a direct response to the outcry of the delisting of The Crew. However, this may turn out to be a Pyrrhic victory for gamers overall, considering the precedent has now been set for the removal of digital copies of games from people's personal libraries. It may have been better for Ubisoft to just quietly let The Crew die off, rather than proactively removing the game from people's accounts. I say this despite the small victory that The Crew fans have secured for their favorite IP, as a new California law might open the door to the removal of other titles from gamers' libraries. Mere weeks after Ubisoft announced the implementation of offline modes for The Crew 2 and The Crew Motorsports, California passed a law changing the way that gamers can acquire products through digital storefronts. And while the article might claim that this new law is aimed at clearing up the confusion around purchasing these products, the rest of the article doesn't actually inspire confidence as a consumer, and it seems more like these companies are bolstering their ability to remove games from your library for whatever reason. The article reads as follows. Essentially, the new law will mean that storefronts like Steam will no longer be able to use terms such as buy or purchase when advertising a game that always requires an online connection. Since you won't technically own the product and servers being taken offline would render the product useless, a different word will have to be used. The official phrasing in the bill's summary reads, it will, quote, prohibit a seller of a digital good from advertising or offering for sale a digital good as defined to a purchaser with the terms buy, purchase, or any other term which a reasonable person would understand. That certainly sounds like it's on the up and up, but I've read the Kotaku articles, and the way that they describe us gamers is certainly not reasonable. All jokes aside, I'm not sure that I like this language, but the article continues as follows. Alternatively, storefronts can clearly explain that you're buying a license and that your purchase isn't a permanent transaction, meaning the license can be revoked at any time by the issuer. The most important part of the bill states that passing it will be ensuring that consumers have a full understanding of exactly what they have bought. And yeah, I think that's sort of the problem here. Why would consumers feel comfortable buying something for upwards of $60 or more that they don't actually own? Even if you do trust the industry's PR reps through these game journalists, why should we trust that this will be limited to live service games? Just making it easier to understand that I'm, quote, not buying a permanent product doesn't actually make things better. All it really does is help insulate these companies from further legal issues down the road. As a lifelong gamer and somewhat of a collector, I have a small library of physical games, and if you came into my house and removed copies of games from my bookshelf, that would be stealing. Feel free to call me overly suspicious, but I genuinely don't trust that other games won't start disappearing from people's libraries after this. And it seems like laws like this are only going to make that easier. Like I said earlier, while the language in these laws might imply that these laws are limited in scope to live service games overall, there's no guarantee that this won't affect consumer protections for other games down the road. Just imagine a scenario where Bethesda removes 6 digital copies of Skyrim from your library just in time for the release of their Mega Ultra Booty Edition of Skyrim 2. If you don't think Todd Howard is waiting in the wings to sell you another copy of Skyrim, then naive would be a nice way of describing you. Thankfully, I've still got my physical copy of the Oblivion Game of the Year edition for Xbox 360. Anyway, continuing with the article. Various games have been removed from sale in recent years, with some also being removed from players' libraries at the same time. Ubisoft recently announced that The Crew 2 will be removed from sale and taken offline soon, which saw players' numbers increase massively. This new law would ensure that storefronts make it clear to customers that this is a possibility at any time. Since this law has been passed in California, it won't necessarily be enacted in every state and other regions around the world. Whether this messaging is consistent will likely be a decision to be made by each particular storefront. And see, that's the scariest thing about this new law, is that it forces digital storefronts to make it clear that they can revoke the license for your game at any time. Now, to be fair, I don't want to come across like I'm just dumping all over the games industry. I do genuinely love being a gamer, and I love games, and I love supporting the developers that actually treat their communities right. And I'm sure that the massive uptick in player numbers for The Crew 2 was probably due to some sort of forbidden fruit effect. Telling your customers that a product or service is only available for a limited time can have a positive impact on sales. It creates a sense of exclusivity and urgency that causes your customers to rush to get their piece before time is up. And like I said, it's not hard to imagine a company weaponizing this. Just remember, Skyrim 2 Ultra Mega Booty Edition. But let's rewind just a bit to that initiative I mentioned earlier, Stop Killing Games. Now, the purpose of this initiative was to create consumer protections and ensure the continuity of games, similar to right to repair or archiving laws. And as a developer himself, Jason Thor Hall from Pirate Software actually had some pushback for this initiative on some pretty reasonable grounds.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. And it's really easy to say like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense, with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games.
And honestly, I don't have a problem agreeing with a lot of his concerns because I share a lot of them, just in the other direction. Apart from the technical issues he lists in other parts of the video, his chief concern seems to be the lack of specificity in the language employed by the initiative. He also seems to be concerned about government overreach and their lack of understanding of industry culture. However, Assembly Bill 2426 is not an initiative, it's a fully codified law that is now in effect in California. And the scope of this bill is not limited to live service games, but all digital goods. And as it says in Section 7, digital goods means, quote, a digital audiovisual work, digital audio work, digital book, digital code, or digital application or game, whether electronically or digitally delivered or accessed. Of course, this sounds like an actual nightmare and the direct antithesis of the Stop Killing Games initiative. But hear me out, because there's actually a light at the end of the tunnel here. Assembly Bill 2426 is entitled Consumer Protection, False Advertising, Digital Goods. And while Section B clearly requires the seller to, quote, state in plain language that buying or purchasing of the digital good is a license, Section 4C says that this section does not apply to any of the following, quote, any digital good that is advertised or offered to a person that the seller cannot revoke access to after the transaction, which includes making the digital good available at the time of purchase for permanent offline download to an external storage source to be used without a connection to the internet. So there you have it, guys. This is actually an instance of government working right and protecting the consumer from predatory practices in the industry. And yes, all of the articles that you've been seeing, and sorry, including the title and the thumbnail of this video, have been clickbait in order to get you to interact. But I hope you can forgive me, because the purpose of this video was not to trick you out of 15 minutes of your time, but actually to inform you about what's actually going on with this law behind the scenes. This is exactly the sort of legislation that Thor was talking about in his video as a response to companies advertising single-player experiences that in the TOS actually have online-only functionality. It's a predatory, if uncommon, practice in the industry that has been a blind spot in the law up till this point. And as a fellow gamer, I want to encourage each and every one of you to be vigilant about the types of products that you're purchasing, and hopefully this law will go that extra step to help you guys from making a mistake and purchasing a game that can be revoked at any time. But that being said, in my opinion, physical copies of these products are always going to be superior. Of course, they might take up more space and they may not be as easy to transport as digital products. Keeping a physical library of your favorite books, games, movies, and music can contribute to their longevity, and they don't run the risk of disappearing in the middle of the night. That being said, if you've got a vast digital library like I do, then the best thing you can do is support these developers and give them feedback on what you think about their products. Don't let your favorite online games die on the vine only to run screaming back to them whenever the developers get tired of paying for a product that's not making them any money. Hell, you could even start a YouTube channel or some fan page on another website to talk about your favorite digital products to keep the discussion alive. And before we go, guys, I did want to direct you to one of my friends at FeverDev over at Gamejolt. He is an up-and-coming developer with a passion for his projects and a decent selection you can get for free over on Gamejolt. Be sure to go check him out. The link is in the description, and tell him that the Sapphire Scribe sent you. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and please let me know what you think in the comments section. Were you guys surprised by the developments? Did you hear anything about this law apart from my video? Apart from clicks, what do you think these gaming journalists have to gain from lying to their audience about what actually is happening? Either way, I'd love to hear from you. And thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.